In a world teetering on the brink of destruction, an unlikely messenger returns from death with a divine message that could change everything. Esther Montgomery, an elderly woman who died years ago, suddenly awakens in the grave, her body revitalized by the grace of God. A vision of Jesus reveals a prophecy that will test the faith of nations and the very future of mankind. The message is clear: Elon Musk must heed the call to save humanity. But in this world of skepticism, greed, and power, will the truth be heard in time? Destruction is coming, and only through faith can they survive. The fate of Earth lies in the hands of a tech giant and a resurrected prophet. The sun set over the quiet town of Savannah, Georgia, its orange hue casting long shadows on the weathered gravestones. Esther Montgomery's grave was one of the oldest in the cemetery, a humble stone engraved with the words, "In loving memory of Esther Montgomery, 1930-2015. But on this day, something miraculous was about to happen. A tremor shook the earth, soft at first, but growing louder. The wind began to howl as if the heavens themselves were disturbed. And then, the ground shifted. A crack appeared at the base of Esther's tombstone. Slowly, like the turning of a page in a divine book, the grave opened. Esther's frail body stirred. Her eyes opened wide, staring up at the clear sky. The confusion was overwhelming, but the sensation of warmth filled her being, and a voice she knew, spoke to her from beyond. "Rise, Esther!" the voice commanded. She sat up, feeling the vitality of youth return to her. Her withered hands, once fragile and frail, were now strong and healthy. She could feel the power of the Lord surging through her, as though every cell in her body had been reborn. A vision appeared before her, a light so bright it was almost unbearable to look at. It was Jesus. He stood before her in all his glory, radiating warmth and compassion. His presence was filled with the promise of salvation and the weight of prophecy. "Esther," Jesus said softly, "the time has come. You have been resurrected for a purpose. A great darkness looms over the world, and only through faith and action will it be averted. Go to Elon Musk. He is the key to the survival of humanity." The first thing Esther did was kneel, overcome with awe and reverence for the Lord who had granted her second life. "But Lord, I am but a woman of faith. How can I carry such a burden?" Jesus smiled gently, his voice full of tenderness. "You have the strength to carry this, Esther. Your resurrection is a sign that the hour of reckoning has arrived. Elon Musk, though gifted with intellect and vision, is blinded by ambition. He must understand that technology without faith leads to destruction. Show him the path." Esther closed her eyes and listened to the words that Jesus spoke, words that would echo in her soul for eternity. "Go now, speak to him. The world is at a crossroads. The apocalypse is not a distant future, but a present reality, a consequence of the choices of men." The vision faded, and Esther was left standing in the graveyard, her heart heavy with the responsibility placed upon her. She was not just any old woman. She was chosen for a purpose that she had yet to fully understand. Esther didn't waste time. She moved swiftly, fueled by divine urgency. She knew that she had to get to Elon Musk, the man whose actions had the potential to save or destroy the future. The world was on the brink of a new era. Technological advancement was accelerating beyond control. Artificial intelligence was rapidly evolving, and the threat of nuclear warfare loomed larger than ever. People had started to lose faith in religion, instead worshiping progress and innovation, believing that they could conquer everything on their own. But in the eyes of God, humanity had lost its way. Esther's first stop was to get in contact with Elon. Using the small but still present remnants of her former life, she reached out to him through a mutual acquaintance, a trusted pastor named Reverend John Harper, a man who had helped her in her final years of life before her death. John, who had always been a firm believer in God, was shocked when Esther reappeared. He agreed to help her, seeing the divine purpose in her resurrection. Together, they managed to arrange a meeting with Elon Musk. Elon Musk's headquarters in Palo Alto was a fortress of modernity, a sleek, minimalist building filled with the latest technology. The future seemed to pulse within the walls of the facility, yet something was missing, something essential. As they entered the building, Esther couldn't help but notice the coldness of the place, the way people moved like machines, efficient but without warmth. Elon was seated in a sterile office, his face a mask of concentration as he reviewed the plans for his latest project, an initiative to colonize Mars. He looked up when he saw Esther enter, and the surprise was evident on his face. "Mrs. Montgomery?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "But you passed away years ago." Esther smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I did, but I have returned with a message for you, Mr. Musk." "A message from God himself." Elon's brow furrowed, skepticism clearly written on his face. "A message from God?" "I'm not sure I understand." God has given you the power to change the course of humanity's future, Elon. But your path is leading you towards destruction. You have become so consumed by progress, so focused on escaping Earth and reaching the stars that you have forgotten what truly matters, Faith. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the surface of his desk. I'm doing what I think is best for humanity. If we don't colonize other planets, we're doomed. We have to evolve, adapt, and move forward. Esther's voice became firm, full of divine authority. You believe that you are saving humanity, but in reality, you are hastening its end. You are building technology that will lead to destruction if it's not guided by faith. Your ambition blinds you to the truth. Elon stared at her, conflicted. He had always prided himself on being a visionary, on being ahead of his time. But this was different. Something in Esther's words rang true, something in the way she spoke, the quiet certainty in her voice. Esther continued, her words soft but powerful. You were chosen, Elon, as a steward of this world, and you have a responsibility to protect it. The power of technology without moral grounding will lead to a world of suffering. The path you're on will bring war, environmental devastation, and despair. There is time to change, but only if you listen. For a moment, the room seemed to shift. The hum of the machines, the cool, sterile air, it all felt suffocating. Elon felt something deep stir within him, a sense of accountability that had never been there before. But how? Elon whispered. How do I change? What am I supposed to do? Seek God's guidance, Esther said, her voice filled with urgency. Use your genius to bring about a future that is sustainable, one where technology serves humanity, not the other way around. Protect the earth not just for the sake of mankind, but for all of creation. As Esther stood by, watching the calamities unfold around her, she couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow. The natural disasters ravaging the planet, hurricanes of biblical scale, fires that scorched entire forests, and earthquakes that shattered cities, were not just the consequences of human greed, they were God's warning. The wrath of heaven was visible everywhere, but within Esther's soul, a flicker of hope remained. She knew this chaos was not the end, but a beginning. God had given her the divine task to guide Elon Musk, a man with the potential to steer humanity away from self-destruction. Yet time was running out. In the quiet moments, Esther found herself praying more fervently than ever before. She asked God for strength, wisdom, and the ability to bring Elon to true repentance. Elon Musk, in the midst of all this devastation, was wrestling with the consequences of his own choices. He had seen the fruits of his vision crumble before his eyes. His ambition to push humanity beyond Earth had blindsided him to the importance of caring for the world God had already given them. He had given the world his promises of new technologies, new frontiers, and a new future. But it had led to pain, chaos, and destruction. One fateful evening, while in his office at SpaceX headquarters, Elon looked out of the window over the chaotic skyline of Los Angeles. The fires had grown out of control, and the dark, swirling sky looked like the end of days. The noise of the world outside was deafening. But then he thought back to the words of Esther Montgomery, the woman who had returned from the grave with a message from God. She had warned him about his path, that technology, when separated from faith, could be humanity's greatest downfall. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Esther's contact, Reverend John Harper. It's time. The world needs to hear your voice. The message must be delivered now. Are you feeling the weight of Esther's message? The world is on the edge of a new beginning, or the brink of destruction. What do you think Elon Musk should do? Can faith truly lead humanity towards salvation? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to follow Esther's journey and see how the story unfolds. Your support is the key to spreading this divine message. Share with your friends so they too can be a part of this incredible, life-changing story. The next day, Elon made the decision to meet with Esther once again. This time, however, the air was different. There was no more doubt in his heart, only the urgency to act. Esther arrived at his office, this time accompanied by Reverend Harper, who had been guiding her in prayer. She could see the difference in Elon now, the weight of responsibility and realization that this was no longer about exploration, innovation, or pride. It was about salvation. Elon, Esther began, God's judgment is upon us, and the only way to save the earth is to change the course of human history. Your vision for the future cannot exist without a foundation of faith. Elon met her eyes. I know, he said solemnly. But where do we start? How do we undo the damage we've caused? Esther placed her hand on his shoulder. The first step is humility. The world needs to see that even the greatest minds among us can bow to a higher power. Start with prayer, seek God's guidance, and do not let greed or pride cloud your judgment. Elon stood, his mind racing with thoughts. For years, He had only been focused on moving humanity beyond Earth, colonizing Mars, creating sustainable cities on other planets. But now, he saw that all of that could never be achieved if they didn't first heal the planet they called home. The Earth was God's creation, and it was their duty to protect it. While Elon grappled with his new purpose, the world continued to unravel. People from every corner of the globe turned to their leaders, to their pastors, and to their priests, desperate for answers. Nations were on the brink of war as fears of extinction loomed over them. Environmental disasters grew more frequent, and the floodwaters of destruction rose higher with each passing day. In every church, in every temple, and in every synagogue, people prayed. They prayed for mercy, they prayed for a solution, they prayed for salvation. Yet some leaders remained in denial. The powerful, those who had profited from the rise of technology and unchecked capitalism, clung to their old ways, unwilling to relinquish their power. Some scoffed at the notion that faith could offer any answers. But others, like Elon, were beginning to understand. He had never been a religious man, but something had shifted in him. The anger and resentment he had felt towards the world and its systems seemed trivial now. Now, he wanted to do more. He wanted to give humanity a chance to redeem itself. One night, as the world struggled with the consequences of environmental destruction, Elon experienced something he could never have prepared for. He awoke in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, his heart racing. He had dreamt of the most vivid vision, Jesus Christ standing in front of him, a serene yet powerful presence. The image of Christ was not the peaceful figure often depicted in paintings, but a warrior, ready to fight for the redemption of humanity. "Elon Musk," Jesus said, his voice like thunder yet full of love, "you have been chosen to lead, but you must first walk the path of humility. The future of Earth depends on your choices. You must let go of your pride and place your trust in God." Elon fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the vision. He had heard stories, but this experience, this encounter with Christ, was unlike anything he had ever known. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace, followed by a great burden of responsibility. It was clear to him now that he had been given a second chance not just to save Earth, but to lead humanity toward a new era of faith, love, and redemption. The following morning, Elon gathered his team at SpaceX headquarters. His demeanor had changed, the weight of his previous ambition now replaced by something far more profound. The purpose of his work was no longer to escape the Earth, it was to heal it. "We need to put all of our resources toward climate restoration," Elon announced, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "Our goal is not to escape Earth, but to make sure it thrives. We will use the technology we've developed to repair the damage we've caused. We will create systems to restore the environment, to heal the planet." The room fell silent, but the message had begun to resonate with his team. They too had seen the signs, the wildfires, the floods, the earthquakes, and they knew that something had to change. Esther stood in the background, watching as Elon made the first steps toward redemption. She had no doubt that this was just the beginning of a larger movement, a movement that would span the globe, uniting nations and religions alike in the common goal of saving the world. As news of Elon Musk's shift in focus spread, a surprising transformation occurred. Religious leaders from all over the world began to rally behind him. Pastors, priests, rabbis, and imams came together to support his newfound vision. They held interfaith prayer vigils, calling on people of all beliefs to unite in prayer and action. Esther worked alongside them, speaking at various gatherings, sharing her testimony of resurrection, and urging people to turn back to faith. The message was simple: only through God can humanity find redemption. Elon Musk began to attend these gatherings, humbled by the collective faith of the people. He realized that the power of prayer, of community, was far greater than any technology could offer. As the days passed, the world seemed to be turning a corner, albeit slowly. Elon Musk's radical shift from space exploration to climate restoration had reverberated across the globe, and people were beginning to pay attention. Governments took notice, and the corporate giants who once placed profit above all else began to take tentative steps towards sustainable practices. Elon had set the tone. His once divisive figure now represented hope, a beacon of redemption in a world on the brink of destruction. He spoke openly of the need for humanity to come together, for technology to serve a higher purpose, and for the people of Earth to embrace the Creator's gift of this planet. He shared his own journey of faith, how he had been blind to the truth but had found his way through the divine intervention of Esther Montgomery, who had returned from death with a message for him and the world. But it wasn't just Elon who was driving this change. Religious leaders of all faiths were joining the movement. Priests, pastors, and rabbis rallied to the cause of environmental healing. Interfaith gatherings began to sprout up in every corner of the world, and for the first time in history, people were praying together, regardless of their backgrounds or beliefs. The common enemy was not each other, but the destruction that had been wrought upon the earth. Esther spoke at countless gatherings telling her story of resurrection and redemption. She emphasized the importance of turning to God, of understanding that the future of humanity was in His hands. The message was clear: only through humility and a commitment to His will could the world be saved. As Elon attended these interfaith services, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. It was a peace he hadn't felt since before the chaos began. This wasn't about building rockets to escape to another planet. This was about staying here, on Earth, and ensuring that it remained livable for generations to come. It was a long road ahead, but Elon knew that the seeds of change had been planted. There was hope now, and that hope would grow as long as people continued to turn toward God, not just for salvation, but for wisdom. Just when it seemed that the world was on its way to healing, a new wave of resistance rose. The corporate elites, the ones who had profited from the degradation of the planet, weren't going to go down without a fight. They held immense power, financial, political, and technological, and they would use it to keep the status quo intact. Elon, Esther, and the growing army of faith-based environmentalists knew that they would have to face this opposition head-on. The battle would be long, but they were no longer fighting with mere words. They were fighting with faith. The attacks against their cause came in many forms. Some were political, others were economic. But the most insidious were the technological attacks. Hackers targeted Elon's companies, trying to undermine his efforts to shift focus to environmental solutions. Powerful figures in Silicon Valley sought to discredit his new vision, using their platforms to spread lies and sow division. But even as the attacks mounted, the message remained the same. Only through God can we overcome the forces of greed and destruction, Esther would remind those around her. It wasn't long before the global stage shifted from mere debates about sustainability to a real, tangible fight for the future of the planet. The people who had once fought for the power to control the resources of the earth now found themselves at odds with the very people who were working to restore those resources. In the midst of this political and economic warfare, a new threat emerged: natural disasters. Earthquakes, hurricanes, and fires continued to devastate cities around the world. As the struggle for power escalated, so did the wrath of nature. It was as if the earth itself was rebelling against those who had disrespected its sanctity. But this wasn't the time for fear. This was a time for action. Esther, Elon, and the faithful rallied together, uniting their resources to help those affected by these disasters. They rebuilt communities, offered prayers for healing, and restored homes and businesses. They acted not just as leaders, but as servants, showing the world that compassion, humility, and faith were the true weapons in this battle. As the days turned into weeks and then months, the battle for the planet seemed to intensify. But in the midst of the chaos, Esther received a new message, one that would change everything. It came to her in a dream. A voice, strong yet gentle, spoke to her. The time for restoration is at hand, but you must make one final call. The people must choose. Will they follow the path of righteousness, or will they continue to chase after empty idols? Esther woke up from the dream with a sense of urgency she had never felt before. She knew what she had to do. It was time to speak to the world, directly, openly, and without hesitation. With Elon's support, Esther called for a global day of repentance and prayer. She invited leaders from every faith, every nation, and every community to join in this collective act of devotion. The world was on the brink of irreversible destruction. The time for action was now. And it wasn't just about saving the environment anymore. It was about saving humanity's soul. God is calling us to return to Him, Esther said during her speech. He has given us a chance to heal, but it's up to us to listen to His voice. We must turn from our pride, from our greed, and seek His guidance in all that we do. The global day of repentance and prayer arrived, and for the first time in human history, there was a united effort to heal the planet and the soul. People from all walks of life gathered in stadiums, churches, and open fields. The faithful prayed together for the first time in unity. Elon Musk, who had been at the center of this movement, stood beside Esther and Reverend John Harper, leading a prayer for the earth and for the people who lived upon it. I have seen the power of God's hand in my life, Elon said, his voice filled with emotion. And I know now that our work, our progress, cannot be separated from His divine plan. We will continue to fight for the future of this world, but we do so in His name. As they prayed, something extraordinary happened. The skies above them cleared, the winds calmed, and for the first time in years, the people felt a deep sense of peace. It was a sign that perhaps they were on the right path, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As the world began to heal and the forces of greed and destruction were slowly pushed back, a new challenge arose. One final trial awaited humanity, a test of faith, a test of character. Esther, Elon, and their followers knew that the journey was far from over. The world would not change overnight. But with their eyes fixed on the divine purpose, they would face this challenge together. The global efforts to restore the earth were working, but the forces of darkness, the resistance of those who still sought power, were relentless. And just when it seemed the world was on the cusp of salvation, a new catastrophe struck. A great war, fought not just with weapons but with ideologies, erupted. Governments fractured, allegiances shifted, and people fought for the future. In the midst of this war, Esther and Elon knew one thing for certain: God had called them to stand firm in the face of destruction. They had to be the ones to lead the world through this final trial. They called on their faith, and with every step forward, they drew closer to the ultimate victory, a world united in peace, faith, and the will of God. Would you like to see how the rest of the journey unfolds? How do you think Elon and Esther will face the final test? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on this powerful journey of redemption, faith, and restoration. The world was teetering on the edge of total collapse. Governments were scrambling, fractured by internal strife, political maneuvering, and external pressure from those who sought to profit from the chaos. With the global war on the horizon, people began to turn to their faith as their only remaining source of strength. Esther Montgomery had spent years working toward this moment. She had witnessed firsthand the power of prayer and unity, but now she was preparing for something much more difficult, leading the world through a trial by fire. The forces of destruction had become bolder, more violent, and more determined to maintain control. They saw the rise of hope and faith as a threat to their power, and they would stop at nothing to crush it. Elon Musk, having transitioned from technology mogul to environmental savior and faith-driven leader, was now at the forefront of the movement. No longer just a tech innovator, he had become a spiritual icon. His messages, broadcast across media platforms, were filled with a blend of optimism and dire warning. The battle was not just about the environment or politics, it was about the survival of humanity itself. As battles erupted across the globe, the faithful, unified in their belief that their actions were divinely guided, prepared for the ultimate test of faith. They gathered in sanctuaries and makeshift churches in humble spaces filled with hope, and they prayed. "Lord, we are ready," Esther spoke aloud during one of her broadcasts, her voice both steady and filled with emotion. "We have chosen to fight, not with our fists, but with our hearts and minds. We will carry your message forward, no matter the cost." In the days that followed, the world became increasingly divided. The faithful continued to rally around Esther and Elon, but the opposition was formidable. The elites, who had long controlled the world's resources, grew desperate. They were willing to use any means necessary to maintain control of their power. One faction, led by the infamous corporate magnate Julius Ashford, had begun to manipulate the global food supply, using it as a weapon. Families in underdeveloped nations were starving, while wealthy countries hoarded resources. It was a brutal and calculated move, and it was working. Elon and Esther understood that this war was not just about the environment anymore. It was about survival. Ashford and his followers were waging a war of attrition. But this time, their methods would not go unchallenged. With the world in chaos, the message from Jesus Christ was clear. It was time to fight for justice. Through their combined efforts, Elon and Esther managed to rally the world's leaders, the world's faith-based leaders, pastors, priests, rabbis, and spiritual guides, united to offer their support for the fight against the forces of destruction. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples across the globe opened their doors to the poor and displaced, offering both food and prayer. "We will not allow them to starve us," Elon said in a heated speech. "We will not allow them to control us. Our strength lies in our unity, and our unity lies in our faith." As the struggle intensified, an extraordinary event occurred. A series of global earthquakes and storms rattled the planet, as though nature itself was joining the battle against the forces of destruction. The weather patterns seemed to follow a divine pattern, often hitting the hardest in areas that had been overrun by corrupt leaders. Esther, holding her faith steadfastly, saw this as a sign from God. She knew that while humans were struggling on the earth, they were also fighting a spiritual battle, a battle for their very souls. In one pivotal moment, as a massive storm ravaged the coast of California, Esther gathered the faithful in prayer. The winds howled, but within the storm's fury, they found peace. As the storm passed, a calm descended. It was as if the earth had taken a deep breath, pausing to allow them a moment of clarity. In that moment, Esther had a vision of the future. She saw Elon standing atop a mountain, overlooking a world that was no longer ravaged by greed and power. Instead, the earth was thriving, its resources restored and its people unified. She saw a new era of peace where nations worked together for the common good. And the faith that had brought them together was the guiding force of their lives. But it wasn't just a vision, it was a promise from God, one that would come to fruition through the efforts of those willing to fight for it. The final confrontation was inevitable. As the world's leaders gathered for a peace summit, it was clear that the stakes had never been higher. The forces of destruction had gathered their final defenses, militarized corporations, rogue governments, and a media machine designed to discredit those working for global healing. The showdown was coming, and it was going to be bloody. Esther, Elon, and the faithful knew that this was their moment. They had to stand firm in the face of overwhelming opposition. As the summit opened, a series of violent attacks erupted outside the venue. Terrorists, led by Ashford's operatives, stormed the gates, trying to sow chaos and derail the peace process. But the faithful did not back down. Armed with nothing but their convictions, they fought back. Elon, along with a team of military and civilian volunteers, worked tirelessly to ensure that the summit would continue. Despite the attacks, while many fought physically, others, priests, pastors, and spiritual leaders, remained in prayer, their voices lifting up to God, asking for His intervention. And God answered. As the battle raged, the skies above the summit darkened, and lightning struck the ground with unnatural precision. It was as if the heavens themselves were joining the fight. For every attack that came, there was an equal force of protection. Torrential rains washed away enemy barricades, and earthquakes toppled their structures. In that final moment of battle, as Elon and Esther stood together, leading their forces with unwavering faith, the enemy was defeated. The world was saved. In the wake of the battle, the earth began to heal. Nature began to regenerate, and humanity, though scarred, found a new sense of purpose. With the forces of greed and destruction defeated, the world was free to rebuild, guided by the values of compassion, unity, and faith. Elon Musk and Esther Montgomery became global heroes, not for their achievements in technology or politics, but for their unwavering dedication to bringing humanity back to God. Elon, once a man who had sought to leave Earth, now dedicated his life to its restoration. The companies he had built were transformed into beacons of sustainable innovation, all with the guiding principle of faith at their core. Esther, now revered as a prophet and leader, continued her work with the faithful, spreading the message of hope, peace, and redemption. Together, they ushered in an era of healing for the planet and for the souls of its people. Years had passed since the battle to save the earth. In the wake of that defining moment, a peace had settled over the world, but not without a deep cost. The war had taken its toll. People, heroes, and leaders alike had sacrificed everything to ensure the survival of the planet. Those who had fought, both in the physical and spiritual realms, bore scars, some visible, some hidden within their hearts. But through it all, they had emerged victorious. As the sun set over the hills of the restored earth, Esther Montgomery stood alone on a quiet, windswept rise. The world around her, once ravaged by greed and destruction, was now blooming with new life. The forests had returned, animals were abundant again, and cities had been rebuilt with care for the planet that sustained them. Yet, as peaceful as everything appeared, Esther knew that true healing came not just from the earth, but from the heart. The war had not just been fought on the front lines, but within the very souls of humanity. Esther's thoughts wandered back to those early days when she had received the divine message from Jesus Christ, calling her to serve a higher purpose. She had returned from death, resurrected, to carry a message of hope, of repentance, and of unity. It was a message for Elon Musk, for the leaders of the world, and for every single person who had ever felt lost or hopeless. She had spoken of redemption, of mankind's potential to heal, and of the power of God's love to change the world. And now, standing at the precipice of this new era, she saw the fruits of that labor. But death, too, was part of the process. As much as the world had healed, as much as peace had been restored, the loss of so many lives still echoed in her heart. Esther had witnessed firsthand the toll that war had taken on both the innocent and the brave. Friends, family, and allies who had fought beside her in the struggle for survival were no longer here. Their sacrifices were not forgotten, their names etched into the fabric of the new world they had created. She thought of Elon Musk, the man who had once sought to leave Earth and now found his purpose in saving it. His journey had been remarkable, and his transformation from a tech mogul to a humble servant of God was a testament to the power of faith and redemption. But even with his newfound purpose, the pain of loss lingered within him. Esther had been there when he had broken down, overwhelmed by grief, unable to reconcile the violence that had surrounded them. But over time he had found peace, not in fleeing to the stars, but in staying on Earth, walking the path of righteousness and compassion. Together, they had led the world through its darkest hours. As she stood on that hill, the breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of distant birds, a small group of children approached her. Their faces were filled with innocence, hope, and joy, the very embodiment of the future they had all fought for. One of the children, a young girl named Grace, took Esther's hand, looking up at her with awe. "Grandma Esther, what was it like? What was it like when everything was so broken?" Grace asked softly. Esther smiled, her eyes filling with tears as she knelt beside the girl. "It was a time of great darkness," she said, "but we didn't give up. We fought for each other. We fought because we believed in the power of God's love, and we knew that no matter how bad things seemed, we could heal together." The child nodded, her innocent eyes filled with understanding beyond her years. "And you were the one who helped us find hope, right? You helped us believe in the future." Esther's heart swelled with emotion. These children, they were the legacy of their struggle. Their future had been bought with the blood and sacrifice of so many. But now they were here, alive and flourishing in a world made better by the faithful efforts of those who had come before them. She took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. The sky had turned a deep crimson as the sun dipped lower, a reminder that with every ending, there was a new beginning. The light of Christ had guided them all to this point. There were still many battles to be fought, internally, spiritually, and for the preservation of the earth itself, but Esther knew that it was a battle they would continue to fight, hand in hand with the one who had saved them all. As the children ran off to play, Esther stayed behind, alone for the moment but filled with peace. It was then that a familiar voice spoke to her, clear as day. "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Esther's eyes welled up with tears once more. She had heard those words in a moment of deep despair, and now, in a time of peace, they held even greater meaning. For all the death, for all the grief, and for all the destruction the world had endured, there had been a divine purpose. God had not abandoned them. He had guided them every step of the way. And now, it was clear, the battle for redemption was over, but the work of love, faith, and restoration had just begun. As the years passed, the world continued to heal. However, in the quiet of the new world, a tragic yet peaceful moment arrived. Esther, the guiding light of this generation's salvation, grew older. Her days of fighting were behind her, but her legacy was set in stone. One evening, as she sat in the small chapel that had been built in the heart of a thriving city, Esther felt a great peace fall over her. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had done her part, she had spoken the truth, she had fought the good fight, and she had led the world back to God. In the arms of her family and those she loved, Esther passed from this world into the next, her body finally free from the struggles of this earth. The world mourned. The faithful gathered in churches, temples, and synagogues to honor her life and her sacrifices. Her name became a symbol of hope, faith, and redemption. In death, she was more powerful than ever, her message now immortalized in the hearts of millions. Her funeral was a gathering of hearts. People from all walks of life came to pay their respects. Priests, pastors, environmentalists, world leaders, and children whose lives had been saved by her actions all stood in reverence. It was not a day of mourning, but of celebration, a celebration of a life lived in service to others. As the funeral procession passed through the streets, crowds lined the way, holding candles and singing hymns of praise. The earth, restored and vibrant, stood as a testament to the work she and so many others had done. Elon Musk, now an older man, stood at the front of the crowd, his heart heavy. He had lost a friend, a mentor, and a mother figure. But he knew that Esther's message had reached its fulfillment. She had brought the world together, and now her work was done. As the service concluded, Elon approached the podium and spoke words of remembrance. "She was the light that guided us when we were lost," he said, his voice breaking. "She showed us what true leadership looks like, and now it's up to us to carry that light forward. We must continue her mission, for this world will only continue to flourish if we walk the path she set before us, guided by faith, compassion, and love. The world has been forever changed by the sacrifices of those who walked before us. Their lives, their actions, their faith, these things echo through time. As we continue to move forward, we must remember their lessons. What is your role in this new world? What will you do to carry forward their message of redemption and healing? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us in building a future based on faith, love, and hope.